Hello, I hope you're doing well during this quarantine craziness. This is my presentation about how I grew as an educator this year. My name is Kevin Lapin. I'm a teacher at Madera South High School. I teach Living Earth and AP Computer Science principles. I got my teaching credential from Fresno Pacific University, and it was a single subject credential in biological sciences. A little bit about my background. I was raised in Madera, California. I went to Madera High School. I was a student athlete, played basketball and baseball in high school. I ended up playing baseball in college. Pretty good grades, didn't get into too much trouble. As an adult, when I moved back to Madera, I became a substitute teacher. I did that for a couple of years in Madera Unified, mainly as a permanent substitute at Madera South. But before that, I also had 5 years of experience as a computer system administrator. I didn't teach the traditional student teaching route. Instead, I had an internship through the district. And as I like to say, I was raised in the streets of the classroom. But I was very fortunate to work with a good group of teachers, and I had a few mentors on my site that really helped me to learn immensely over the course of my time there. I also coached baseball at Madera South, and before that I coached baseball at Madera High. My MIC participation status, I'm an early completion option candidate. This year I wanted to focus on two areas. The first, CSTP 1, which is engaging and supporting all students in learning. The second was CSTP 5, which is assessing students for learning. Also, over the next few slides, I may be a little bit more brief because I want to limit this video to less than 15 minutes. I know your time is valuable, but I also want to be thorough as well. So there were a couple of problems early in the classroom in the year. I noticed that students were, especially my freshmen, really struggling with connecting to the content in a meaningful way. And ultimately, they weren't retaining the information. So they were really good. They were really trained to fill out any worksheet, fill out any notes, write something down, and turn the assignment in. But the quality of work was very low, and there was just a general lack of interest in the content. They came in with preconceived notions about the content. This is science class, so I'm not good at science, or this is science, so it's boring, or this is science, so I love it just because it's science, regardless of what we do. So overcoming that was definitely a challenge, but at the beginning of the year, I didn't know what strategies would be effective at getting students to overcome those things. And so by this point in the year, I've learned how to implement strategies to increase the academic rigor, center the learning around the students, and really engage the students and get them interested and excited so that they critically think about the concepts and retain the information. Another problem was that I really struggled to effectively generate and analyze student data. This really made it challenging to work with my PLC and to really steer the course of instruction for my students. Although this is kind of still a work in progress, I've really improved this year in learning some things to help generate and analyze data, and also apply that to the classroom so that it can help me to lesson plan. So my individual learning plan, ILP goal number 1, came from CSTP 5, and it was element 5.3, and it says reviewing data both individually and with colleagues to monitor student learning. Naturally, with that problem that I had, this made sense to pick as a goal. My specific goal was to strengthen my skill in reviewing the data by regularly doing it, and also doing it with colleagues so that we could kind of plan units and steer the course of instruction in general. And so one of the ways that I wanted to do that was measure my students with a strategy called CER, which stands for Claim, Evidence, and Reasoning. And I picked a modest goal, 10% improvement, but it was also just part of CER, which is identifying a claim from a scientific article. And so I thought this would be useful because it would give me the opportunity to generate some data, analyze it, and then kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work in terms of implementing this strategy. So one of the pathways in which I did this was I really fully participated in our site action research, which at our site is huge. Groups of teachers work together. This is our PD, and we work together on a weekly basis to work through a specific teaching strategy and generate data, implement it in the classroom, and then analyze if it's effective or not and share the results of our research with the rest of our colleagues. So I did that for the entire first semester and really fully applied myself in that process. And so that was one of the pathways in which I thought was very effective. So 7 things that I did over the course of trying to meet my goal. I'll highlight a couple of those. One was I learned how to create common formative assessments. Creating assessments was not my strong suit at the beginning of the year. In fact, I wasn't very good at it at all. And over the course of the year, I worked with my PLC and colleagues from the site action research to create these formative assessments and also create common formative assessments that other teachers could use in their classrooms when they were learning the same concepts. One of my favorite things that we did, number 4 here, was we utilized posters in the classroom. So we created CER posters so that we could standardize some of the language. And also so that when there was a time gap in between practicing CER strategies in the classroom, we could refer back to the posters as a visual aid for the students to kind of refresh their memory and give them an opportunity to go, oh yeah, I've seen that before. So I think that was one pretty effective thing that I did in my pathway to my goal. So how did I get the data? I gave students pre and post written assessments, and they were assessed in 3 critical areas: claim, evidence, and reasoning. But I really wanted to focus on the first part, claim, because that's kind of the basis for it. If you can't accurately identify a claim, then you're going to struggle with finding evidence to support a claim and reasoning why that evidence makes sense to support the claim. And so that's really what I wanted to focus on. So one of the things that I did in that process was I created a CER rubric and worked with my PLC to create a rubric that made sense, not only to convey our expectations to the students while they were preparing for the assessments, but also to help us when we were grading the assessment and keep us consistent and calibrated in terms of how we were grading across our PLC so that we could accurately compare data and that it was valid data. I also picked 3 focus students so that I could compare how these strategies were being effective or not across different types of student groups like EL, gifted, and SPED. So this is the CER rubric. As you can see, it's a scale from 0 to 4 overall. And then for each point, there's a scale from 0 to 4. If you get a 3 or a 4 in that area, you get the point. And so it gives us a really good ability for students to see what's expected and teachers to grade based on what's expected. So as you can see from the data, with the pre-assessment, 54 students were not able to accurately identify a claim from a scientific article. And then in the post-assessment, only 10 were not able to accurately identify a claim. This was huge for me, not only as a moral victory that validated what we were doing, but also it taught me a little bit about persistence and using the same strategy over and over throughout the course of a semester. As you can see down here, 62% were able to identify the claim on the pre-assessment, 94% were able to identify the claim on the post-assessment. And as I said before, as I analyzed this data, it really had important meaning to me as I was going through the process. So my 3 focus students, my EL, she couldn't identify the claim on the pre-assessment, and on the post-assessment she could. Same with my SPED student, she could not on the pre-assessment and she could on the post-assessment. And my gifted student could do it in both instances. If I look at their overall scores for their pre and post, they all improved, and it was a drastic improvement for my EL and my SPED student. So overall, 32% increase in general across all students, which was great. I met my 10% goal in that, but more importantly, along the way, I learned how to implement CER strategies, and I learned more importantly that it's important to be persistent in implementing those strategies. So my second ILP goal came from CSTP 1, and that was element 1.4 that says using a variety of instructional strategies, resources, and technologies to meet students' diverse learning needs. My goal in this aspect was to just learn as many new strategies as I could, try to effectively implement them in the class, and then kind of measure how effective they were throughout the course of a unit. So I picked Unit 3. It was just one unit in the semester, and I wanted to compare overall student ability to meet standards from the pre-assessment to the post-assessment. And so that's what I did. And so 10% is the improvement that I wanted to see in overall academic content standard mastery. So this is all standards for the whole unit. And I use things like, I went to PDs for Kagan, HHMI, which is a curriculum for Living Earth. And then I did the Madera Classroom Management Method Seminar, which is where I learned Fred Jones strategies and time to teach, so that I could improve student engagement and things like that. So one of the cool things in the pathways that I want to highlight is the first one here. I had an opportunity to observe and visit an next-gen science standard model school where they were implementing these strategies in the classroom with their 9th graders. They were similar in demographics to my students, so it was very eye-opening to see the high level of achievement, and it had a huge impact on me towards the end of the semester, whereas I was already implementing some of the strategies that they were doing. One big takeaway, one of the favorite things that I did, number one here, things that I did in the classroom along the way, was I implemented a real-time behavioral norm feedback during all group activities. So one thing we were doing was working in groups more often, but I had a grid on my whiteboard where I was writing in real time feedback based on the work that the students were doing. So if students were getting off track, I would write feedback that told them that. So all they had to do was look at the board at any given time as they were working, and they could use that information to police themselves as well as get back on track. So it was very effective in my classroom, and I plan to use that forever. I really enjoyed that process, even though at the beginning they didn't like it. But it kind of took the pressure off of me as somebody who's an adversary that comes in and says, hey, get back on track, versus all you got to do is just read the board, you know what the feedback is, and then some leader in the group is going to make a change. So I grew a lot in watching my students as they worked and giving that feedback. So some evidence of my growth was that I pre-assessed them. I'm going to start moving a little quicker because I only have a couple minutes. So did I meet my goals? I would say in that area, in terms of what I did, yes. But in terms of what students did, as you'll see, not so much. One of the things that I implemented was HHMI, which is a curriculum which has interactive stuff. It's very advanced for 9th grade, but they can do it. Another thing was I changed desk groupings from what I learned in the Madera Classroom Management class. And then this is the overall performance for the unit. As you can see, the pre-assessment, 0% had mastered, 100% not mastered. And then the post-assessment, 12% mastered, which is a horribly low number. And it was super disappointing, but it did meet my goal of student improvement. So in the future, I know some of the reasons why we didn't get to finish the whole unit before the semester ended. And also, looking at some of my data here for my focus students, my gifted student really improved, and my EL and SPED students didn't improve as much. So that would tell me that it's maybe more geared toward higher achieving students in the first place. So I did meet my goal, but more importantly, I learned a lot. So in terms of my areas, I went from exploring to integrating in both areas. I was just trying to figure stuff out at the beginning of the semester, but now I've got some systems in place that I learned throughout the course that I'm going to keep forever. So I would say that I'm integrating a lot of things. What are my next steps? I'm going to continue to work with my PLC. I'm going to continue to go to PD that's similar to this, that really challenges me. And so my 5-year plan would be to move into innovating areas in some of those ways. So that's all I got. I made it in the time. Thank you guys for watching.